We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience. We're just running a little behind schedule, but thanks for you all who joined us right before the lunch break. By way of introduction, my name is Mike Redding, and within the newly formed Accenture Ventures, I'm the Managing Director of Strategic Technology Innovation, which means that my responsibility is to go out and talk to Accenture's Global 2000 clients about technology innovation and how it can transform their business. And then I like to say, put Accenture's money where my mouth is, because I get to oversee our program where we take minority investments in strategic technology companies. And so today on the panel, we're going to talk a little bit about innovation within a large corporation, how you do it, how you bridge those gaps between the big enterprise and the small startup, and kind of war stories around finding success and learning from maybe, I'll say, failures along the way. So that's what we're going to do today. But first, I'd like each of the panelists who have joined us today to give a brief introduction of themselves and their role at their respective companies, and then we'll start the conversation. So, Anju, please.
Yeah, my name is Anju. I lead the digital partnerships for Monsanto. This is a fairly new role for us. It was created 2 years ago just to be able to plug and play with Silicon Valley and other startup companies in East Coast as well and globally. And we also work with other industry leaders which are not within the agriculture. So Monsanto is an agriculture-focused company. And we work with industry leaders who are not in agriculture, but really working with them to figure out how we can accelerate ag.
Good to be here. My name is Daniel Tu. I am the Group Chief Innovation Officer at Ping An Group. So a little bit about Ping An. We are based in China. We're solely in China, but we are the largest non-state-owned enterprise in China. If you go by Fortune 500, we're number 41 in the world, the largest insurance company in the world. So in my role, we're an integrated financial services group. We have 28 subsidiary companies. At the group level, we focus on 4 key ecosystems: financial services, healthcare, auto financing, and real estate financing. So I look at the technology out there, talents, business models, and help us enhance our platforms to be much more competitive. So for reference, with the financial collapse of in 2008, Ping An was placed on the world's one of the world's largest companies to fail, or not to fail, I should say, GSII. So we're one of 9, the only one from China and Asia. And so I oversee our VC overseas team, help with our PE and direct investments, our pilot programs with leading academic and research institutions, and our partnership with the technology companies around the world.
Fantastic. So we have some pretty different and very large-scale companies here today to talk about their perspective on innovation. So I think it's going to be quite intriguing. So we'll start off with kind of a high-level softball question, but take it how you will. But I'd like to understand is, how do you, as you're trying to set up your programs, how do you define innovation and on the spectrum of raw invention through partnering and applied capabilities? What are you setting your corporate targets around, and how do you kind of approach what is otherwise kind of a pretty broad concept?
Yeah, and when I think about innovation, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Monsanto, but we are a very strong innovation company, but we've always been a strong innovation arm within the genetic space. So biotech has been huge for us, and we have done a lot of innovation. We have disrupted ourselves over and over again within the biotech spectrum of things. But 3 years ago, we acquired a company called Climate Corporation, which is a software as a platform for farmers. And if you think about it from my perspective, I've been with Monsanto for 15 years. That company truly disrupted us, right? So, and we are learning quite a bit from them as well. And that's what was one of the drivers behind creating the digital partnership role within Monsanto, is we are not a software-based company at all. We are a legacy agriculture company with a very strong end in biotechnology. So what this role really helps us do is bring external innovation that is happening at a very rapid pace. We can hire even the talent that needed to help us accelerate in that space. So we work very closely with external companies, and we have a distributed innovation strategy internally. So it's not a centralized innovation. We have innovation happening in several functions throughout R&D and commercial and supply chain as well. And this team essentially works very closely with all the distributed innovation team to bring the innovation from external to internal. So it's been, I would say the way it has been working, it's very aggressive for us, and we are learning a lot, and we are doing a lot of plug and play. Last year alone, we worked with roughly 45 to 50 different external companies. We ran a POC with them, and out of those, we did licensing with close to 10 different external startup industries, right? And those are all, each one of those licensing terms are roughly 3-year plus. So it has accelerated us quite a bit than what it would have otherwise if we hadn't done this.
Okay.
So for us, it's a bit different. I gave you at the outset some context. We're the largest non-state-owned enterprise. So since the inception, we've never had received any preferential treatment from the regulators. We've really had to work hard. So if we subscribe to the theory that growth comes in 3 paths, organic, inorganic, I cover the 3rd path, innovation technology. And to give you, again, some context, we have 120 million active customers, middle class to mass affluent tier 1 cities. We have 385 million online users. And meanwhile, the disruptors are coming into our industry. So you have Alibaba, Tencent coming in, and they're encroaching the business from different angles, through pay, through messaging, and platform. So for us, it really is about not only growing the top line and looking at the bottom line, but the ability to scale up and also scale out. Scale out meaning what? Meaning that we capitalize on the adjacent revenue streams, but also now we're thinking of moving outside of China because we've aggregated all these mid and back office capabilities from online KYC to risk management, tranche writing, and so forth. And so for us, our philosophy is very simple. Invest, acquire, incubate internally, and the third is partnerships, POCs and pilot programs.
So you both mentioned partnering, so I'd like to maybe double click on that and ask what, as you're, like obviously there's a lot of great companies here today, and the last panel was kind of coming from an angle of acquiring or investing, but from partnering, what are the attributes, right? Because as you both represent very large, diverse organizations, what are the attributes in a startup, the handle, if you would, that you'd use to grab a hold to say that that's a good match for us, we think that's the kind of partner, besides just the core of the concept? What are you looking for in a startup that you think you can engage with?
Do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So when we look at partnerships, it's much more than just startups. When we invest in a company, a startup, and to even public companies, it has to be strategic. You have to understand our AUM is close to $1 trillion. Our balance sheet almost the same size. But so even if we hit a home run, it does not move the needle for us. So it has to be strategic. So that's number one. Number two, I'll give you 2 examples.
Sure,
and
please.
I think I can share this with you. So we are about to form a USD $1 billion fintech fund based in Silicon Valley, global facing. The idea is because we have 120 million active accounts and 385 million online users, these portfolio companies, we see we can easily bring them into China, help them land. And so that is our strategy. The other piece is we are the largest employer in Shenzhen, and Shenzhen is undergoing a change. It is no longer the factory to the world. So the city fathers and the party cadres are cognizant of the fact while these migrant workers refuse to go back to home to the farmlands. So off our balance sheet, what we do is we go into Israel, Silicon Valley, talk to the Weizmann Institute, Tel Aviv University, Stanford Research Institute, and talk about bringing them into China, pairing them with companies, setting up science parks or industrial parks, and that would be the transition for these cities. So it would be Shenzhen, healthcare, Beijing, fintech, and so forth. So for us, we look at partnerships in multiple ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for us, I would tell you, again, I have a degree in genetics and not in IT. I'm not a software person at all. But having done this for 2 years now, and having shown a lot of success, one of the things that we clearly look for in startup is the team. The technology comes first, definitely. But the differentiators I have seen, at least within our space and the technologies that we are going after, is the technical depth of the team and the CEO, and I'll be very transparent, CEO being able to talk about the business value and the technology seamlessly makes so much difference. And I'll tell you, there's, in the last year itself, we had 3 Monsanto. We were about to run a POC with them. And again, there's a lot of companies, but these 3 in particular, each one of them had exit within 2 to 3 weeks of being with us of $500 million plus. Nirvana being one, Epigee being another one, and third one is still not out. So we are seeing a lot of exits. That's probably some things that is going to stifle our innovation at the same time, given how we are looking at it. But again, team plays a very strong role. In terms of industry leaders, we partner a whole lot with industry leaders who are not in ag, but since the Climate Corporation acquisition in Silicon Valley, ag has suddenly become very attractive to non-ag companies. You talk about a lot of non-ag companies, and now they have an agriculture vertical. And we are talking to Googles of the world, Amazons of the world. So it's a very different model that we have now than we had ever had before.
So at least an interesting follow-on question for both of you, which is, how do you get the elephant to dance, right? You're both representing very large organizations, and as you just said, you've got these new digital players, whether they're startups or even a Google or an Amazon that are used to working at maybe a pace different than your traditional industry. So what have you found, or techniques, or how do you match the speeds between the two, the partners you're looking at and your own business units or your own IT folks? What have you tried to do, or what's worked for you in that context?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. It's not making the elephant to dance in the room. It's not easy, and especially for those who are representing large enterprises here. And if you don't have a digital partnership type of role like this, you won't know what I'm talking about. Really, it's one of the hardest job within our company at this point. Because you have got, if I come into a room in a meeting, if I go to a meeting, suddenly why is she here, right? You are literally threatening the core of who we are as well. But we do have, but I'll tell you, within Monsanto at least, there's a very strong support from our ET level for pushing disruption. That's how we are, that's our DNA always. But at the same time, and I was talking to somebody this morning, I don't know how many of you have heard the clay layer, right? That's a new terminology, which is a very strong middle management that gets stuck in not being able to let the ideas flow seamlessly. So it's a very strong partnership influencing internally, and I think in every company you have 1 or 2 drivers within an organization that you can go after and help them and encourage them to help them think that they can lead the path either through internal innovation or through external innovation. So that has been a huge focus area for the team that I have, is being able to find the right partners internally who are constantly thinking about disrupting our own industry.
Daniel, your thoughts?
So at Ping An, because we're non-state owned, so there's always been a culture of urgency. That's number one. We run IT as a business. It's not a support type of thing, cost center. The other thing is, if you look at McKinsey's projection by 2020, there will be 3 times as many devices than people. And Accenture says by 2020, 35% of the traditional banking services will be usurped by digital disruptors. So for us, we see what's coming on a daily basis. For example, in China, the average WeChat user is on that platform 4 or 5 hours a day. Think about the data sets that they have. So we understand that they come into this space not from a financial service data set, but really about lifestyle through payments. So for us, really it is whether the elephant can dance or not is not the issue, is how fast can we move. Really, how fast can we move in pace with these disruptors. And 300 migrant workers come into tier 2, tier 3 cities. These are customers that we want to acquire. Can we lower the cost of acquisition and how? So these are the challenges we face every day.
And for large enterprises, to add to that, I don't think it's a choice for us anymore not to do this,
So
That's how we see it.
So I then, and maybe as you talk about that layer of clay, I haven't heard that term either, but I've experienced it, so I know exactly when I've bumped into it. So now I know what I'm up against. How do you, have you thought about any certain strategies to try? Obviously, you described top-down leadership. You kind of had that corporate imperative, but have you found any formulas or techniques that you've used that have helped chip away at some of that natural bias to try to get people in, the individual employees to feel like they can be engaged, even if they don't have a special innovation management, or just encourage more innovative behavior? So maybe Daniel, we'll start with you on that one.
So one of the first things I did when I joined Ping An in 2013 was internally we would have an innovation monthly, which is an in-depth look on certain topics. We would organize workshops, tours for the CEOs of these 28 companies. We would also bring in outside experts. So that is really the idea of changing their mindset over time. The other thing is we use some of the top consulting firms around the world. They bring us the best practices. A little bit of a history. So in the early days, our two largest shareholders, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, they brought in the best practices from Wall Street. And then we got to be so large that Peter, our founder CEO, decided to bring in HSBC. At that time, they were one of the largest banks, and they had the perfect integration, mid, back office, and front office. So we brought them in. And so now we're at a point where we are truly one of the largest in the world. There's nothing to benchmark with. So my job really is, first, to change the mindset, two, to bring in strategic partners. So we talk to the Googles and Facebooks of the world. Although they're in China, they find it very hard to land their products and services in China, and we're fully licensed to do that.
All right. Your thoughts on things you've seen or tried or succeeded at in terms of engaging culture, changing behaviors, getting the average employee excited about participating in innovation?
Yeah, and we learned through it. It's not that we had this nailed in completely. We are still learning. But one of the few things that we saw in the first 2 years of having done this is you just have to show success with one or two examples, and you are igniting the entire organization. And I'll tell you, last year we didn't have any deep learning projects within Monsanto, right? And then we did partnership with an external company. Again, we are a legacy foundational agriculture company that will have hard time, getting talent for deep learning type in the time that we need. So our accelerator was, how do you bring an external company, run a partnership model to show success on one or two projects? We started out with one project. It was essentially a year ago, and it completely disrupted we have a COE for analytics, and it disrupted the analytics teams as well. And there's somebody who can do better than them, right? We have, for lack of better words, we do have not invented here syndrome. Having been in R&D for 10 years, I was subscribed to that NIH syndrome. But since we did that project that was so successful that now we have 10 or 15 deep learning projects internally owned by our own employee pool. So you have to start small steps, and I'm sure you would see that within your enterprise as well. But once you show one or two successes, organization picks it up on its own.
That's fantastic. So let me flip the question. And now, if that was kind of what you're thinking about from the elephant's perspective, let's flip it around to the advice you'd give to the mice, right? To those startups that want to engage you, that they want to enter China, they want to enter the digital ag space. What would you coach them on how best to approach you, or what can they do, or what's a fair expectation they should have on how to find success and not get frustrated because it doesn't happen overnight?
Yeah, and so one of the things that I saw early on is when there were Monsanto does boatloads of analytics, right? And when I started talking to startup companies in analytics, one of the questions, which was very frustrating from the startup companies, is why Monsanto interested in analytics or in deep learning, right? And we know what we can do and what we cannot, and we will figure out a way if there are solutions, because startup companies are not going to tailor solutions for ag. We know this. They're going to tailor solutions for healthcare. That's big business, or others, but we know how to apply it to our industry, right? So I don't think that's that's something that would be relevant, and that was not the right thing to do initially. But at the same time, having a laser focus on what your business model will deliver is key for us, absolutely. If that's not there, then the team doesn't speak a whole lot for us.
Daniel, your thoughts on the
I think for China, for the folks who are thinking about getting into China, they have to realize that Asia at large, Korea, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, very digitally advanced. So if you're thinking about competing in whatever industry, you need to have a strategy. I'll give you an example. We sold our online commerce platform to Walmart. They started to close some of their hypermarkets, deciding to go warehouses and the rest with online commerce. You have to understand the marketplace. That's number one. Number two, the next generation, Generation Z coming into the Chinese consumer market, very, very different. We are learning by the day. We actually, over the summer, we bring in interns who are teenagers trying to observe how they consume content and so forth. So these are the things that we try to learn. And the third thing is, I must say the regulatory regimes for financial services, for media, especially information, very, very strict. And so you have to understand what the regulatory regime is. We've managed to navigate over the years. For some of the top tech companies around the world, they're still struggling with this because it changes by the day.
Fair enough. All right, we're winding down. So maybe from each of you, your perspective, a technology, could be a technology category or an individual startup, but something you've got your eye on, something you think is going to be important to your company, to your business, your sector, the next couple of years. So, folks are thinking about, but something maybe it's not ready yet, but it's a twinkle in your eye, something caught your attention. So maybe we'll start with you, and then Daniel will go to you, and then we'll have time for maybe one or two questions.
Yeah. Few things that we are absolutely going after is customer analytics. Retail marketing space has been evolving very rapidly than we can get our arms around, and we are completely in infancy within that space. So we are watching that space very closely. As I've said before, advanced analytics has been, and I hate to use the term AI, but it is AI. So that we are keeping eyes on AI space like a hawk, clearly. NLP is another technology that's going to change how we are doing boatloads. Blockchain is very new. But that's something that is very core to us, and if one thing that will definitely disrupt ag would be blockchain because of how much manual our ag processes today. And then there was recent news on storing data in DNA, and that has the flurry of emails that has gone around internally at Monsanto is huge because we are the largest in the world DNA producer. So that has been huge for us.
So maybe you'll be putting some of the hardware manufacturers out of business because of your histories. So Daniel, your thoughts?
So AI, I know it's overblown, but AI is key to us because we have the largest sales force on the ground. We have 1 million boots on the ground. And so while we retool them, re-engineer them on a daily basis, we understand over time attrition. And so AI is key, not just front-facing, but back office as well. Distributed ledger or blockchain is key to us because we understand not only do you cut down their operating expenses, but for us, we see huge upside in terms of financing, transactional financing, supply chain financing, and so forth. And the third piece for us is online KYC. Online KYC, biometrics, AI, and DLT, key for us.
Fantastic. All right, I think we have time for like one question, so I'll grab the one in the back who raised his hand first. Please shoot.
I think that question is being asked on a daily basis by Tencent and Alibaba, right? IP is key. This is something that China has to understand, that as the second largest economy, that piracy, the respect for IP and patents, that is coming around. So I think Chinese companies going forward, especially in the fintech space, you will see more and more innovation. And for a company like yours, I know that a lot of MNCs have a VC team stationed in China looking at some of these companies.
Any response you want to share with that?
No, we don't have a whole lot of business in China, so I cannot comment on that. We
All
have
right.
a JV in China, that's about it.
All right, well, with that, we're going to let everyone go on to lunch. Thank you to my panel. That was fantastic. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. Thank you for your time. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon.